Good evening, my friends. This is Arthur Lestrange. I'm going to read to you a little excerpt from my story Chitin, which is the third story in my first collection, Betrayals and Entrails. I hope you enjoy. A few weeks after his first date with Sally, Kevin's family were confronted with some bizarre aspects of his appetite. They first wanted to put it down to a final growth spurt at the end of his puberty, but one night it became apparent that something strange was afoot. He sat with Natalie one evening watching The Simpsons, and when their father called them upstairs for dinner, of course they never went up until the ad break or the end of a very entertaining episode, a strange hunger took over Kevin. As he stood looking over the rice that prime beef mince spiced with homegrown peppercorns and mint, the carrots, aubergines, broccoli and potato his parents had prepared, he felt his mind drifting, almost like going to sleep, but not quite. His mother's talk of the day, the easy exam questions the dumbest of his students had got wrong, being the highlight. His father's grumble about the gridlocks in town, both fading from Kevin's mind, not in sound so much but in meaning. It wasn't that these things didn't matter, and it was different than that. Kevin lost all comprehension of them. In a gradual descent from reason, the talk became as nonsensical as the garbled noises of an animal. It may have been 10 or 20 seconds or even a whole minute. Kevin didn't know, even though the second hand of the kitchen clock above the fridge was ticking in plain sight. Kevin was different. Something about him had changed. He smelled food, needed it. He walked closer to the table. "Kevin, are you all right?" his mother asked. She said it in a pleasant tone, but the vacant look on his face made her think drugs or problems or anxiety or something else, some wriggling morbid doubt in the back of her mind she couldn't hold down. "So much to choose from, eh?" his father said, not looking up. Kevin continued right up to the edge of the table. His nose twitched, his mouth opened and shut in mindless instinct. It made irregular yawning and burping noises. Natalie said, "Yuck," grossed Kevin, but he didn't hear, or didn't appear to. His mother approached, putting her plate down and walking with real concern toward him, eyes squinting and focused on his condition. His father slowed his talk of the traffic and cast a careful eye Kevin's way. Kevin's arm shot out, right into the bowl of rice, the hand clenched hard and firm, squishing soft grains out through tanned fingers, and shot back into his mouth, which licked and swallowed and chewed, far more than it needed to and far quicker, more machine-like, more efficient, not savouring or enjoying. The others gasped, and their eyes widened as Kevin's arms began shooting out quick like a boxer's jab, with a halting beginner's clumsiness yet very fast, violent and aggressive and desperate. Kevin's eyes held that same glazed-over, vacant, detached look as he deposited small handfuls of food into his mouth, which just kept on chewing and swallowing in unnatural efficiency. "Kevin!" they shouted, but it meant nothing, at least to the young man they were talking to. He was a little larger than all of them, and suddenly his new muscles became apparent to his family as the first dawning of the possibilities of physical violence trickled into their minds. "Kevin, what are you doing?" his mother pleaded. He made no noise other than his voracious eating. Natalie at first had thought her brother was being funny, being a little different, thought the show was for her, but after the first few seconds realised something was not right. "Kevin, Kevin!" His father was saying his name, surprise turning to anger, turning to genuine concern and fear, snapping his fingers right in front of Kevin's face, which did nothing to dissuade him, and it became apparent that soon there would be no food left. Kevin seemed to like the rice the most. Natalie had been liberal with the amount she put in the pot, using far more than she needed. Earlier she had turned the stove top on and left for the TV, shouting out that her share of the cooking was done. Before her father could finish asking if she remembered putting in the water, she was gone. Kevin's hands ploughed into the rice, sending rains all over the table, and his family's shouts did nothing to bring him back, as did the way his mother tried shaking him. Kevin grabbed the bowl, began moving the food down the other end of the table. This caused Kevin to lean forward while his arms machine-gunned away, and as his father pulled on the tablecloth, Kevin's nose twitched, and his mouth squeaked and squealed and growled, and he began to walk, then run, into the table. He was running but going nowhere, tall body jiggling forward and back like a tree in a crosswind, stomach pressing against the table. His family watched this bizarre display, unsure what it meant, unsure why it was happening. Then he shot outward onto the table in a horizontal blast. "Oh, Kevin, control yourself," Laura shouted at her son, but later on she would consider that she meant this more for herself, as it was the second time in only a few weeks that her comfort had been jarred by his condition. Kevin scrambled and wriggled over the table, his body attempting movements it couldn't make, pushing and thrusting and flailing around while his nose buzzed and buckled with the animalistic distortions made by the hyperactive muscles of his upper lip, and his mouth gurgled primitive and vulgar. Then he crawled. Legs and arms rigid straight, moving at the shoulders and hips, he shot down the length of the near 3-metre table toward his father in a flash, colliding with the food in what David thought was some kind of amphetamine-induced display of machismo. This idea died when Kevin curled up on his side, legs bicycling madly, eyes rolled back in his head, arms shooting out right into food and back into that rabid maw. David stepped back. He wasn't the fighting type and didn't understand what was happening to his son or why. He noticed that Kevin was biting into the ceramic rice bowl, biting it hard enough to make himself bleed as David heard the unmistakable scraping sound of teeth grinding thick porcelain and the low guttural growl that came from deep within his son's throat. "Oh my God, what's happening?" Laura said. Natalie watched, not entertained but worried about her brother. In the background, Homer strangled Bart on TV. Kevin's head was in the bowl. David relaxed a little, grateful Kevin would not slice his mouth so much. His heart beat fast and he decided to act. He called his son's name, called again, called again. He shouted, "Kevin," until his voice hurt, and the grief in it was audible, the frustration making those warbling peaks and troughs none of them wanted to hear. Not sure if it was sensible, he lunged, tried to grab those stiff, strong arms, but achieved nothing. Kevin took no notice. He tried Kevin's neck, but again there was no give. Kevin was too strong. "Has he got a fever? What's wrong with him?" Natalie shouted. David edged his hand onto his son's forehead, and Kevin spasmed. He writhed, arching his back, and rolled over, stomach thrust outward. He screamed, rolled again, this time away from David, who grabbed one greasy, rice-coated arm which cushioned Kevin's fall from the table to the floor. At once Kevin's look changed, eyelids fluttering, hands rubbing his head, groans escaping. He appeared to be himself once more. Laura knelt down by his son, squeezing him, checking, looking for anything out of the ordinary, patting him all over. "Kevin, are you all right? What happened?" When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. He rubbed the sides of his mouth. I don't know, Mum. Just feel really weird. Did I black out?" "What can you remember?" she asked. He blinked a few times. "I don't know. Nothing, I guess. Just The Simpsons. Natalie, we were laughing. Then we came up for dinner. I remember the stairs. Natalie's feet in front of me, smelling the food." He trailed off, blinking and nearly crying, mouth wobbling. "I knew they should have kept you in hospital a few more days," Laura said, crying a little. "Maybe you've got some kind of memory or brain damage, something like that," David said. "Yeah, maybe, Dad, I don't know." The room was full with the sound of the family breathing. Thank you, my friends.